Amazonía es la mayor selva del mundo.
Is the largest jungle in the world. Flames devour it. Endanger oxygen and lives of millions and millions. Commander Hugo Chavez at the United Nations Conference in Copenhagen 2009 on climate change based his speech on the basis of two slogans from the social movements that attended this event. Let's not change the climate, let's change the system. And the second one was, if the climate was a bank, the rich would have already saved it by now. He also quoted the French writer Hervé Kempf in the final part of the prologue of his book, How the Rich Destroy the Planet. It said, "We cannot reduce the material consumption on a global scale if we do not bring the powerful down to several steps and we do not fight inequality. It is necessary the ecological principles so useful when it comes to consciousness, global thinking, consume less and distribute better." According to Chavez, climate change is the most devastating problem of the present century, which exacerbates the impact on global crisis affecting us. Consumerism denotes a lack of sensitivity and solidarity of the rich towards the poor. The commander wondered, the rich are destroying the planet. Do they have plans to go to another one when they finish with this one? The Amazon, dispute between ancestral spaces and imperialist interests, which is the same of saying dispute between the life and the big capital. This is our critical move for today. Let's develop it, let's look at maps, let's analyze it with interviews, and as always, we have your presence. Okay, for the past 31 days, serious fires have plagued the Amazon. More than 500 acres have destroyed by the harsh fires that have traveled the triple border of Brazil, Bolivia, and Paraguay, and part of the border with Peru. However, we found the beginning last January, according to the National Institute of Space Research of Brazil, which assured that from this month, there is more than 72,000 fires in the Amazon territory. Today, there are at least 9,500 uncontrolled fire spots. From Bolivia, President Evo Morales, in one of his statements, he said, "This should be a call for the countries and governments of the world to protect the environment with comprehensive, inescapable, and shared responsibility." His Brazilian counterpart, however, Jair Bolsonaro, argues the situation is not out of control. The fires are common in this area, while he accused the NGOs, without proof, of being behind this strategy. We will act to control the fires in the Amazon. The extensive use of personnel and equipment by the armed forces, auxiliaries, and any other agency will make it possible not only to combat illegal activities, but also to contain the advance of fires in the region. Because of my military experience and my career as a public man, I have a deep love and respect for the Amazon. We remain, as always, open to dialogue based on mutual respect, truth, and conscience of our sovereignty. Our countries have shown solidarity with Brazil. They were also willing to offer support. Well, the commotion is global. Many have put statements from all walks of life. We have the French President Emmanuel Macron hold presence on the second day of the G7. He said, he explains that the convergence, that we must agree to the assistance, and that will be offered to fight the fires in the Amazon. Even before he threatened to bring down the agreement with the European Union, with Mercosur.
Esto podría torpedear sin duda alguna la sostenibilidad o la continuidad del acuerdo Unión Europea-Mercosur suscrito hace poco.
Which was just written off a couple of months ago. There is a true convergency among all of us. We agreed to help the countries affected by these fires as soon as possible. There are several of them. This morning, Colombia called the international community. We must be present, and we will be. We must be respectful of the sovereignty, aim the reforestation, and help each country to develop economically. But the challenge is the Amazon for these countries, as well as for the international community, and in terms of global warming, oxygen, and the fight against climate change. And at the same, we have our Julio Villo Neto, who's the mayor of Manaus. He said, "We open our eyes so Brazil does not risk its richest region, its most strategic region, its last potential development frontier. It is the Brazilian government's duty to maintain the Amazon preserved. The Amazon is the interest of the world, fundamentally for all. So the world entirely must demand a sensible, intelligent, and appropriate governance. The consequences are regrettable for our country in all respects." Well, we all spoke of Hugo Chavez, but way behind, Commander Fidel Castro already warned about 3 decades ago in the United Nations. Let's watch the video that we have recovered. And a very important biological species is at risk of disappearing with the fast liquidation of the conditions of the natural life. This is the man. Now we take conscience of this problem when it's almost so late to stop it. It's necessary to show that the society of consumption are responsible fundamentally for the destruction of the environment. They came out of the colonial metropolis and imperialistic policies that at the same time brought the poverty that it affects most of the humanity. With just 20% of the world's population, they consume 2/3 of the metals and 3/4 parts of the energy that is produced in the world. They have contaminated seas and rivers, the water, the air. They have weakened the ozone layer. They have saturated the atmosphere with gases that alter the climate conditions and that have catastrophic effects that have already been seeable. I want to see some digital sites. Let's start with Telesur. On August 26, we have fires endanger indigenous communities. This is the indigenous territory of Araboy in the Amazon. The Awa people are in risk of disappearing. The Awas live without contact with the world and are among the last indigenous peoples isolated from the world. And in an open letter of the indigenous people, they say that and I quote, "Many think that this is an emergency for the planet, and they're right. But it's much further an emergency for human rights, for the people who live in these lands forever." This is what the letter, the COICA. COICA is the Confederation of Indigenous People. This was said by Joshua Castellino of the indigenous communities, that their ways of life have been endangered due to governments who really don't care about their lives. Let's go now to page 16. The Bolsonaro plan is intending to put infrastructure. Let me find okay, it says that there are central electoral plants, and we've got some images here. And he says, among other things, that the Open Democracy platform ensures that there's a report that reveals the purpose of Jair Bolsonaro's aim. And what he tries to do is to retrieve the 1983 project with which they intended to build on a huge extension that is in 3 states of the Amazon basin. This area represents the biggest one. It's bigger than Peru itself, or the half of Argentina. The plan would be carried out through the liberation of territories, deforestation, and just clearing out big extensions. This would be destroying green patrimony. Bolsonaro has said it clear, saying that you developed by clearing out some spaces, and now we want to have the same opportunity. This is what Diario 16 says. Now let's go to a recommendation that we find it in the strategic place of Latin American studies. It says, democratic resistance in the time of Bolsonaro. This is written by Camilo Bodenweider and Barbara Ester. They say, the Amazon in flames. They're speaking about the Paris Accord, where Brazil was going to adopt strategies to reduce the climate change. However, when it was negotiated, Brazil had a leadership and the political will to create these conditions. This year, there was going to be a 95% reduction of the budget to combat climate change. This had never been seen before. That could only have as the antecedent the posture of Trump in the U.S. and the way Bolsonaro sees things. In this sense, this topic will isolate the president among his peers. This will be analyzed further on by our guests. As always, we would like to see more information, and with our correspondents, let's talk to Ignacio Lemos in Brazil. After the decree of Jair Bolsonaro, many officials have gone to the fireplaces to support. They have gone to Londoña after the huge international pressure on behalf of leaders of several countries of the European Union and the mobilizations that have been carried out in major cities of the world. All of this against the policy of Jair Bolsonaro's idea of deforestation. This on behalf of this has been said in all of his public speeches. And also the reduction for the institutions that protect the environment. The government of Jair Bolsonaro, there has been a reduction of the budgets to these sectors, and there has been an advance of the extraction and the wave of fires that has been denounced in Roraima on behalf of the illegal woodworkers. Thank you, Nacho, and to keep on giving us more details and have more information, our correspondent Osvaldo Saya, through his tweet, says, we're going to see the forest spots. He's going to be giving us more information because he's on the spot. Let's go to the map. The Amazon basin, commercializing nature, shared vegetable lung, its natural wonder of the world, with the largest tropical forest land in the world, a surface of 7.4 million square kilometers, which is almost 25% of the American continent. It's in 9 countries, Brazil, Peru, which have the biggest parts, and then Bolivia, Colombia, Venezuela, Ecuador, Guyana, French Guiana, and Suriname. All of these are members of the OTCA that was created in 1996 and have been historically unuseful because of the complex use. It is located in the central and northern part of South America, and it covers the tropical rainforest of the Amazon basin. It is just over half of the total rainforest of the Earth. On 11/11 of 2011, it was declared one of the 7 natural wonders of the world. On biodiversity, it has a huge variety of fish, birds, reptiles, and mammals, as well as 30,000 species of vascular plants. The last approximation, it says that apparently 34 million people live there, of which 60% are concentrated in cities. The most populated city of this region is Manaus, in Amazonas, with just over 2 million people. And the smallest one is New Loja, in Sucumbíos, with just 42,000 people. Culturally, it's one of the most diverse areas in the world. The indigenous people are divided in more than 400 tribes and according to their language. So we have Tupíes, which are the biggest ones. Then we have the Ye, Caribe, Arahuacas, Paratocanas of the Amazon. It is the water source and life. It holds 20% of the planet's Earth freshwater reserves. It is largely in the Amazon River, the most powerful and longest of the world. However, it is thought that tons of mercury used in illegal mining have been thrown to this river. Geopolitics, politics of occupation versus conservation. In this place, there have been a relationship between power and geographic location, marked by fire by the colony matrix of thought and action, by a pattern of frontier economy that they think that the resources are infinite. There has been an expropriation of land and a predatory urbanization process under the two opposite logistics, saying that colonization or culture, and that of destructive accumulation, which sees nature as a valuable reserve. This is how there has been a confrontation between the farming and exploitation of wood and the use of conserving the land that is promoted by several scientists. Well, this has been expressed in everything that we heard from Nacho Lemos, that has been denounced that the fires are on purpose. This has been, he reported via Twitter, not only for our critical moves. We would like to analyze the reasons. What is the underlying reasons for all of this? Do they just want to give all of the resources and sovereignty to the big capital companies, which has been set in place by Bolsonaro, but began with Michel Temer? Let's expand on this with our analysts, which we will contact right after our pause. Did to our reserve. Years of working here in our reserve, and now look at our communities in flames. It wasn't enough with the river. It wasn't enough with our sources of life. They put everything on fire. We will not be quieted. We want everybody to come and see it, to defend us. We want to send a message, first of all, regretting and profoundly saddened of everything that's going on in the planet and the repercussions to humanity. And second of all, we want to say that this really deserves an investigation. The international community must act now. This cannot go on without any punishment of this policy of Bolsonaro that has opened the doors for the production of all of the agrotoxic and the monocultivation of the soy, and just by saying that there is no Amazonic rainforest, then let's bring all of these production in, and mining, and oil, and the wood industries. This cannot go out without punishing. The world is crying for this, for all of these fires, of these that are very big. Regardless of all of this situation, the politicians have just tried to obtain some type of benefit. 2 months ago, the European Union and Mercosur signed an agreement, and now a couple of people are just looking after themselves. The news medium, who is not seeing what's going on, they're saying that the Amazonas is on fire. It's being said that it's a natural disaster, which is not a natural disaster. This has been provoked. These are very clear statements that help us to keep on developing our critical views. And these are ancestral interests and imperial interests. This is the same as what we did in our editorial piece. So it's like saying the dispute between life and the great capital. For anybody who is here, we would like to see where is the tragedy? Where is this all going on? Maybe there might be a clue ever since Jair Bolsonaro became president. It has been a total give in all of the richness to the capital. This has been a complete rewind of all of the human rights and no protection to the communities that live there. And all of this with no institution protection at all. Some hours after the assumption of the presidency, he said that all of the problems of lands was going to the Ministry of Agriculture. Historically, this ministry has had ties with the industries. Teresa Cristina is a former leader, and what she did was she pushed out Dilma Rousseff. With Ms. Cristina, there has been an open door of all of the industries who don't even have to look at the agriculture requirements. Now they even brought new pesticides. At the same time, Jair Bolsonaro criticized a protection fund that was created by Lula da Silva and cut the budget for protection of the indigenous community. NGOs of environmental protection say that 20% of the jungle has been destroyed. This has even increased the rate with the taking precedence of Bolsonaro. Specialists say that the commercial war between the U.S. and China may have something to do with the fires. In case that China doesn't buy soy from U.S., this may be an opportunity for Brazil. In this sense, there are accusations against two multinational companies that have the key to those companies, Cargill and GPS, which is the biggest meat producer. The owner of the second company also put out Michel Temer. Well, after all of these minutes of information, I would like to invite our guests, two ladies, both from Brazil. They connect from us, Silvia Beatriz Ardoven. She's a university professor, and she also works with the farmers
Paulista. ¿Cómo está, profesora?
How are
Silvia?
you,
Bienvenida.
Professor?
Y Flavia Braga Vieira,
And
socióloga,
Flavia
profesora también
Braga
de la
Breira,
Universidad
she is
Federal
also
Rural
a
de Río de
university
Janeiro,
professor
específicamente.
in Rio de
Comienzo
Janeiro.
con la profe
Well, let me
Silvia.
start with
Acá se conjugan
Professor
tantos
Silvia.
factores,
Here we
está
have
la noción
several
del territorio,
factors, which is the
todo lo
struggle
que
for
tiene que ver con la
territory,
ancestralidad, con las
everything that has to do
comunidades
with
originarias,
ancestry, but
geopolítica,
knowledge,
ideología. A su juicio, el
ideology.
detonante ha sido esta
To your
política tan
understanding,
agresiva de
is
entrega de Jair Bolsonaro.
what triggered all this?
Buenas tardes
Good afternoon
a los espectadores de
to
Telesur
everybody who
y
watches
también
Telesur,
para ti, Lucía, y
and for you, Lucia.
Realmente estamos viendo muchísimo en Brasil. Suponemos que hace
We assume that
50.000 años
over than
que ese
50,000
territorio
years,
está habitado. Gran parte de la Amazonia
that part of the
es
Amazon basin,
antropogénica, es decir, es un bosque, una
it was
selva,
a forest, a
que no
jungle
es natural,
that is not
en gran
natural.
medida. Una parte fue
A
generada
part
por la acción humana, es decir,
was done by
los seres
human action. This is
supieron
to say
expandir,
that men
el bosque y la
expanded
y
the
hoy
forest
el capital
and its
la
occupation,
destruye,
and now the
¿no?
capitalism is
Para
destroying
nosotros es
it.
una gran preocupación
For us, it's a
porque,
great
la
concern,
selva tal como está,
because the forest, as it is,
solo podrá recomponerse
will be able to
a
recover
al nivel anterior
to the previous
con alrededor
level
de 5.000 años.
after 5,000 years.
Y esa destrucción
And
es
that destruction
irreversible,
is,
en un plazo inmediato.
and the destruction will not be able to recover in a short term. This
si bien,
action
es una región de frontera de avance
is a
de
frontier
agronegocios,
to advance
de la
all of the
soja,
companies
de
of soy
la carne bovina,
and
y
meat industry,
de la minería, la gran minería,
and also mining.
y viene siendo amenazada hace mucho
And now
tiempo,
it's
no
being
es
threatened
solamente
for some years now.
durante el
It's
gobierno
not
de
just
Bolsonaro,
during
pero,
Bolsonaro.
Siempre las políticas
However,
públicas
the
de
public
desarrollo
policies of
de las
development
inversiones se encontraban con algunos obstáculos,
always had
contradicciones,
some
porque había
obstacles,
todo un marco,
some difficulties,
legal
because there was a
y
framework of
instrumentos
protection
estatales para regular
and that
la acción y el
regulated the
impacto sobre el
actions
medio
of the
ambiente y
impact
sobre
on
los
the
territorios,
environment.
inclusive sobre sus habitantes. Pero
But
la
now,
acción de
Bolsonaro's policies
ha sido
has
de
been
completa destrucción
of complete destruction
de estos marcos legales
of these legal
y de
frameworks.
desarticulación, de desmonte de los medios estatales para
And there's no
controlar,
presence at all of
o
government
disminuir el
entities.
ritmo de la destrucción.
And this will the only thing that it has led is to increase the rate of destruction. So now we're at a situation of global warming. Right now we have fires in Africa. The case of the Amazon basin is not the same, because there's a direct action of destruction where the rainforest of the Amazon makes combustion very hard. So now this leads us to believe that there has been a human action that is totally criminal. And this can be on behalf of miners, of the wood industry, of groups that are funded to create more than 70,000 places of hotspots, of fire spots. So what we see is that there is an intention of putting these fires on. So, and what we can see is that they're localized in the midst of the rainforest. So they've used some technology to provoke combustion, because this is not natural in this environment. And the 70%
de los focos de incendio están bordeando
are
las
bordering
áreas de conservación
the
y
conservation
los
areas
territorios indígenas,
and
las
the
tierras ya
indigenous
reconocidas
territories,
de los pueblos
these
preexistentes.
lands that
Es decir, la
belong to
sensación es
the
que está
peoples
habiendo
who
una
live there.
presión sobre ellos
So they feel that there is a pressure on them
para hacer tierra arrasada
to
y
make clear
disponibilizar
lands,
después de los patos consumados,
and
después de
after
los
that the
techos
fire is
consumados y
over,
todo quemado, disponibilizar
they
esta
can take
tierra para
over these
el
lands
agronegocio y la minería.
and for agriculture and mining.
Gracias, profe. Ya le sigo
Thank you,
preguntando. Quiero
Professor.
preguntarle ahora
I'll be right back
a
with
la
you. I want to
profesora
ask
Flavia si coincide en que
Professor
esto es una
Flavia if you
clarísima disputa
agree
entre
that this
poderosos
is a
financieros.
clear dispute between power.
Sí, buenas tardes. Sí, estoy de
Yes,
acuerdo con la
I totally
profesora
agree with
Silvia,
Professor
que de
Sylvia,
verdad que es
because
un
in
momento
fact
de expansión de la minería, de la
what they're
ganadería,
doing
del
is just
agronegocio
expanding
de la soja,
the meat company,
que
soy
estamos
company,
viviendo.
agriculture
Los
company,
grupos
mining
de poder
company,
que apoyaron a
the
Bolsonaro, que
power
apoyaron,
groups that
prendieron el
supported
golpe contra la presidente Dilma en 2016
Bolsonaro, and
y
first
que
the ousting
sustentaron
of
al gobierno de
Dilma,
Temer y
and
después
then supported
están con el
Temer,
apoyo
and now
también
they
del
support
gobierno
Bolsonaro.
Los grupos de poder,
These power
los
groups,
más importantes
the most
son
important
la
ones
minería
are the
y
mining
el
groups
agronegocio. Y
and
son grupos
agricultural
nacionales,
groups. And these are
internacionales,
national
todos
and
en
international
conjunto,
groups, all of
que
them
están
together,
haciendo del
that
tema
what
del
they're
medio
doing
ambiente
is
en Brasil
of
un tema muy
environment
central.
something that is
No
very
por las
central,
razones buenas,
not for the
esto
good
es decir
reasons,
que
not
están
because they're
interesados en la
interested
conservación
in the
del medio
conservation
ambiente
of the
y la
environment.
utilización racional de estos recursos, pero que sí
But on the other
están
hand, what
interesados
they're
en
interested in
hacer un desmonte de toda la
is
institucionalidad
deconstructing all of the institutionality that was constructed in the country from the 1980s and that has guaranteed for some years that the rate of destruction of nature had been stabilized. And now what we see is totally the contrary. And the first reason that Bolsonaro has attempted to justify all of these forests is that there is a period of drought in the region. All of the data have shown that this is not true, that we have more rain than we've had in the past years. So it's true that it is a dry season, but with more rain than normally. So there is no justification from this standpoint. There is no justification either that it had been groups, like the president had said, that there are groups of NGOs or activists, international activists, that are interested in starting this fire to later have a critical position against the government. But no, there is no information in this sense. And now the president is trying to put the blame on the European countries that are, yes, they are interested in the Amazon, but they're interested because of the economic potential. Even more, Bolsonaro, who is involved with Trump, with Israel, and with other power groups. So I think that there is no justification unless we can say that the government has begun ever since this year to authorize the mining companies and the agriculture companies to expand their business going against all of these places that are reproduction of nature and life. This is totally going against the areas of preservation
de pueblos indígenas.
and the areas of indigenous population. So the most public enemies of the government are the NGOs that work in environment and the indigenous parties that live and survive with their lives from nature that we see here. There is no justification of nature, of the government, or anybody that works there. They have just put a green light for these big companies to come in, and this is why we see that it's the most terrible time than many other years before. And the international community, in a way, is paying attention, is putting their eye on this process. I want to go back to Profe Silvia. In this sense, what price will Bolsonaro have to pay for these actions? I'm sorry, I didn't listen to you. I was asking about the consequences for the Bolsonaro government. Well, first I would like to just explain a couple of things. What is the role of each one of these people in the story? Whoever carried out these destructive actions are not the big international operators, like Cargill or JBS. They're not willing to put dirt on their hands. What they do is they put the possibility of placing some business and stimulating thus a huge anxiety that So what they do is to do this, they're using third people so they can clear out big portions of land. So there is a distribution in the work, and the role of Bolsonaro is not that of having a project development, but also what his intention is to destroy. Probably thereafter there will be a development program, but right now he's doing totally the contrary. He has authorized with his speeches that have been totally inappropriate, and what they're just doing is revealing his crimes and authorize any other criminal to come in. And in order to act in a fast pace. So the effect that there was on behalf of the world is that we know that there are some mediation. This is to say that there is an accord that was signed. Oh yes, there's this agreement between Mercosur and European Union that provoked some pressures on behalf of the producers. A way of getting that pressure out of the way is to threaten with the excuse of not signing it, and he would make a campaign to resist this and for the European Union to get out of the way. Well, beyond his intentions of this president, we can say that there is a presence in the society, because the U.S. has a special vehicle there, a special vessel.
La amenaza
But the biggest threat
de que no se pueden realizar negocios inmediatamente
is that
de
we can't make
exportación
business on that instant.
de los ruralistas de aquí, en realidad se
So
volvió contra
the truth is that it goes against,
las intenciones de Bolsonaro y sobre todo se volvió contra
and they went basically even
digamos, la base de apoyo, los intereses de la base de apoyo,
the political
apoyo
base
electoral
of
de
support
Bolsonaro. Entonces tuvo que
of
salir
Bolsonaro.
a decir
So he had to go out
que
and say
cuidaría
that he would
de
take
la
care
Amazonia, que tomaría
of the Amazon base
medidas de combate
and that he
a los
would
incendios y
take
de
into account
represión
everything that has been said,
a los saboteadores.
and there will be a restriction to those who want to
Aprovechado
sabotage
para
the
eso,
process.
el viernes pasado, el día 23,
Just on Friday the 23rd,
de la noche,
on 8
ha hecho un
o'clock at night,
pronunciamiento en Radio
there was
Nacional,
a
la cadena
national
nacional de radio y de televisión,
TV
diciendo que él se
report
ocuparía
saying that he would take
y
over the
el
situation.
instrumento para ocuparse de eso, después que desmontó toda la
After he said that he wouldn't do so, after he
destroyed
destroyed all of the operations that were already in place for protection, he says that he will use the military forces.
Dijo, por un lado que iba a usar las Fuerzas Armadas, por otro lado que iba a utilizar
So if there is some tolerance, a guarantee to order by which the governor of the state or the province of the Amazon could ask the military intervention if there is some type of occupation. And third, Bolsonaro has announced that he's going to open the door of Venezuela. Now that he sees that he has no way out, he's threatening with the worst scenario, worse than the one we have now. So therefore, it is worrisome.
Gracias, Profe Silvia.
Thank you, Profe Silvia. I would like to ask Flavia, with everything that we've seen and the March situation that just places us with a challenge, and there's a challenge between the people who don't want to see the government not do things and the companies just take over. Yes, it's true. Because there are groups that have denounced, be it that they were agricultures and they were part of it, and NGOs, and all of these groups are being threatened. I think everybody is under fire because now we see that it's also one-on-one. The people of organizations, of investigation, universities, everybody is threatened by the government because they're saying the truth. And what the government is doing ever since January is they have cut any type of economic support, and they're trying to punish those who are saying the truth. So here we have a critical situation that starts from the movement of the girls, of the ladies. We can always use the technology, and well, let's hope that this works.
De todas las maneras posibles, por eso es importante el espacio en Telesur y otros
espacios. And that's why the space in Telesur is so important.
Para que podamos traer las informaciones.
And what we do is we place the situation towards the civil society and the rest of the world so they can evaluate. So I think the most important thing now is to is to support these peoples that live in the Amazon basin. Well, the government has not supported them in the least bit. None of these communities that live and survive off the Amazon basin. These are millions of people, and these people are in a situation of insecurity, which is very hard. And in this case, I think the most important thing is and now that anybody who is, what we think we should do is to give some support to the organized people of indigenous communities and farmers that live there and that are in a very hard situation of lots of instability. The most important thing is to make echo of these claims. Do you have... Thank you very much for giving us all this time you gave us to Telesur. See you soon. Here we had our analysts. They're both from the academic side, but both very connected to this feeling of the communities, of the rural communities, indigenous communities that know everything that's going on. Before we go to conclusions, I would like to go back to two aspects. One, Professor Flavia said that there has been a community bloc that has raised their voice, to which that there is also some interest of Bolsonaro with the U.S. In fact, the Professor Silvia said that Bolsonaro said that asking for help to the United States and he would not do it. This bloc, President Macron already said that as things are going, we cannot continue with the agreement of France and Mercosur. We're going to analyze this after the last pause. Our critical move is about Amazon, dispute between ancestral spaces and imperialist interests. It's been a harsh statement to come from the government. They show a lot of tension, and they all hold Brazilian executive responsible for inaction and what they consider an environmental crime. The French President Emmanuel Macron described the situation of an international crisis and called for the inclusion of this issue in the agenda of the G7 summit held this weekend in Italy. He accused his counterpart Bolsonaro of not respecting the climate commitments or acting in defense of biodiversity. He also said that under these conditions, France is opposed to the agreement between Mercosur and the European Union as it stands, and it could even block it. Germany did not agree with the dissolution of the pact after more than 2 decades of tough negotiations, but joined the group of these who have thrown their artillery against Bolsonaro. In fact, Environmental Minister Sveka Schultz decided to freeze about $40 million that were destined for sustainability projects in the Brazilian forest. Shortly thereafter, Norway did the same and suspended its participation in the Amazon Fund, a project created in 2008 based on donations to combat the increasing deforestation of the Amazon, and in which Norway contributed $1 billion. Leo Varadkar, Irish Prime Minister, spoke in the same line as Macron, while the Finnish Minister of Finances, Mika Lintilä, said in retaliation he would propose a communitarian blockade to prohibit the purchase of meat from Brazil. The President of the European Council, Donald Tusk, directly urged Brazilian state to put out the fire if it wants to continue negotiating with the European Union. Bolsonaro responded to Macron that he has a colonialist mentality and that interferes in the Brazilian sovereignty. To Norway, he replied that they should take their money and hand it over to the German Chancellor Angela Merkel to reforest Germany. Even when reports of the advance of the deforestation were made public at the time, he mocked the fact, saying that they used to call him Captain Chainsaw, and now he is Nero burning the Amazon. We want to take advantage of to see our next guest from Bolivia. He's a political analyst. Thank you, Hugo, for being with us. I would like to ask you, is the situation going to have diplomatic repercussions? And in case of France, is he taking advantage of things to his own purposes? Good afternoon. I think that right now there is a democratic crisis, which is of low intensity. Obviously, there are economic interests, but we have to admit that in Europe, the environmental topic is very sensitive, with which the presidents and prime ministers are very careful. It's not that France or Germany are worried for the terrible effects of this government of Bolsonaro, but at least they are quiet with the policies of Bolsonaro and Trump. But of course, this does create some discomfort in the bloc. So some of them will try to take advantage, because these are the countries that are obligated to help out the countries in development to mitigate the effects of climate change and global warming, of which we see it now in the Amazon. Now I would like to ask, is this a regional space that has been a geopolitical aim ever since a long time ago up until now? Do you see it like this? Yes, Latin America is in dispute. Not only with our neighbor, which is the U.S., ever since that America for the Americans, but when it has to do with the interests of the European interests of them in Latin America, due to its biodiversity, it's always been seen as a potential area of where military bases could be installed due to all of the resources and the huge extension that it has. So, of course, this makes that the Amazon basin has several aspects. On one hand, there is an open policy of clear unprotection to favor the mining companies, the agricultural companies, and on the other hand, this allows us to see a policy that you can see totally different in Bolivia, where Evo Morales has increased the agriculture border, but not in the Amazon basis. So that is a total lie. The agriculture frontier is in another area that has nothing to do with the Amazon basis or any type of forest reserves. So there is a part that has accepted the international participation to try to put out these problems, but they don't do it. They don't do it to give it back to the capitalist companies, which is the policy of Bolsonaro. I think in the case of the Amazon basin, we will see many actions in different type of answers. And how the United States is always keeping an eye open on Europe, and what they want to do is just keep a safe face. But their policies only look after their own economic benefit. Can you speak about the manipulation that there has been of the policies of Evo Morales? Well, I'm sorry, we're running out of time. We would like to talk about this in another critical move. Thank you for your reflection. Well, let's go to our final ideas. The capital destroys everything in its path. The Amazon is not an exception. The damage is irreversible. For example, in this case, it would take at least 5,000 years for things to go back. If we consider that it all began in January, according to the INPE, 40% of the fire spots are located in the humid forest areas. The rest borders the conservation areas and indigenous territories that are pressured to leave and make these spaces viable for production and export. This is to integrate these territories to the great chains of destructive accumulation. Bolsonaro does not assume the responsibility, but does not have a development project, not even capitalist, but an effective destruction. Indeed, this has generated a diplomatic crisis of low intensity in which Europe turns its back on Bolsonaro and clearly manifests the disintegration policy of Argentina and Bolsonaro that has applied this policy on the Amazon. This is the end of our critical move. Thank you very much for being with us.